Okay, should be open now. I think everyone can see and hear us. Morning, everybody. Thank you for joining. So today's Cloud Talk is on scaling sustainability impact through cloud and AI. It'll be presented by Stephanie, who I'm sure will introduce herself fully in a moment. But as usual, for these Cloud Talks, just a couple notes before we get started. Any questions, please leave them in the chat as we go through the presentation today, or you can use the Q&A function. It is open. We will set some time aside for the end of the talk so that we can go through all these questions and answers. And at that point, if you're comfortable as well, you'll also be able to come off mute to ask your question verbally if you want. But we'll keep some time for all those at the end. This session will be recorded. All the materials will be shared, all relevant materials will be shared during the talk towards the end. And I'll also provide the links for where we put all these recordings in the chat as well towards the end. So you'll be able to find them afterwards. Other than that, I think we're good to get started. So over to you, Stephanie.
Brilliant, thank you. Hi, everybody. I am Stephanie Wand. I sit in the Group Technology Strategy, Transformation and Architecture team, which as of July reports into Ines Nater. Part of my role is to look at how we can use technology to help Bupa deliver on its sustainability strategy. And as part of that, how we can reduce the impact of our technology and make that more sustainable. So today I wanted to share some insights with you on that, sort of some of our latest thinking, conversations that we've been having around how we progress our sustainability agenda in technology in line with Bupa's new strategy that is about to be released. So plan for today is basically to do a quick recap on the impact of tech and cloud. Some of you may have heard me do that before on a previous cloud talk, so I don't want to spend too long on it, but it just sort of sets the scene up as to why we need to be taking action. And then we'll spend some time actually looking at the cloud providers themselves, what their latest sustainability data is telling us, some of the insights and the strategies that they're using to reduce emissions. And then we'll go back to looking at our role in minimising the impact of our cloud usage, and we'll look at AI as well. So, of course, the story needs to start with sort of the why, and absolutely you'll all be familiar with this. You'll be familiar with the story of the Paris Agreement, which sets out that globally we want to keep warming to 1.5 degrees above pre-industrial levels in order to mitigate worst effects from climate change. You may have seen in the press that 2023 was 0.6 degrees warmer than the 91 to 2020 average, so over half a degree. And 2023 was 1.48 degrees warmer than pre-industrial levels, so just on the cusp of that agreed 1.5. And the sort of view on this year is that it potentially may increase again. We've seen over the past 3 months the hottest June and August on record, the hottest day on record, and the hottest boreal summer on record. So we're very close to that 1.5 degrees, and that really means that, sort of, as you will well know, all action is needed urgently and now. And Bupa is, as you'll know, committed to playing its part. We have our sustainability strategy, part of which is Mission Zero, which sets out our science-based targets, working towards an overall aim of being a net zero business by 2040. The data from the latest data that is sort of available and public shows that our Scope 3 emissions went up from 2021 to 2022. So they went up from 2.9 megatons to 3.5. So at the moment, still going in the wrong direction. So if we sort of narrow down the view a bit to technology and think about the contribution of technology, you'll see lots of different estimates out there on the size of the footprint of technology. That's because there isn't really any good comprehensive country-based data on it. But the International Energy Agency estimate that it's about 4.5% contributed by data centers and data transmission networks today, and that by 2030 that will raise up 43% to 6.4%. Obviously, several reasons for that, some including the rapid growth in the usage of AI, the number of devices and the volume of data. Interestingly, Gartner found that only 6% of organizations actually have a mature, sustainable IT strategy that has clear goals and timelines. So a very low percentage of companies actually thinking about their IT and how to manage the footprint of that. I'm always keen to do both sides of the coin. We need to, of course, be mindful of the footprint of technology that looks like it's growing, but there's also a role to play for us to advance both environmental and social sustainability more widely. There can be, significant impact through the use of tech, be it in the energy industry around increasing the efficiency of renewables, in new technologies such as fusion and carbon capture and storage. Heaps of examples there of how we can actually contribute to reducing emissions more widely. And at Bupa, we have that same opportunity. We can use technology to not only drive our sort of overall digital transformation agenda, but at the same time deliver on our sustainability strategy. And that's through enabling areas like preventative care that reduces the emissions from our claims, digital health that reduces emissions from travel, smart facilities, healthy cities, etc. There are opportunities for us to have a wider impact on the business. But for today, keen to focus in on sort of three key elements or drivers, as these are included in Bupa's new Savannah strategy. So they are going to be front and centre for the next 3 years. And because of that, it's critical for us to be able to answer, I think, 3 questions. What is the environmental impact of our usage of cloud and AI? How are we minimising that? And how are we mitigating any specific risks to our net zero targets through our usage of cloud and AI? So I spoke to some of our technology CIOs last week around this. I've spoken to some of you across the technology organisation. And if we take them in order, if we start with cloud, I think there are 5 things that absolutely we can be doing today and should be doing today. Firstly is keeping track of our cloud providers' progress against their net zero targets. That's obviously important because for us to meet our sustainability targets, we need them to meet theirs, because the goods and services we buy through them have they count in our Scope 3 emissions reporting. So at the moment, we meet regularly with both Google and Microsoft. We do that, yes, to keep track of the progress against their targets and really understand in between their sustainability reports a little bit more context around where they're really focusing, what their sort of in-year priorities might be, etc. And we also use that time with them to look at opportunities for us to collaborate together on sustainability in a way that's mutually beneficial. I thought it might be interesting just to share what the latest data from both of those is saying. I'm sure you're familiar that both Microsoft and Google are aiming to be net zero by 2030. Very ambitious target. Amazon is 2040. And within that, what they've actually committed to doing is reducing emissions by half. And you'll see that in the top left image on the screen. The remainder they're planning to remove basically using either nature-based or technology-based removal solutions. So Microsoft's latest report, basically, you can read through all of these bullets on the slide, but headlines are their total emissions still going up, 29% from 22 to 23. Those scope 1 and 2 reduced slightly, 6%. Their scope 3, which is 96% of their total emissions, increased 31% since 2020. They have stated that this is primarily due to the construction of more data centers. You need to construct more data centers when there is obviously more demand, which is why I personally believe it's up to the users of cloud to also use cloud responsibly. On the water side, their water consumption also increasing 22% from 22 to 23. They have water targets as well as decarbonisation targets, and they have some pilots underway. I believe it's in Washington for a data centre designed for supporting AI workloads that they intend to use zero water for cooling. At the moment, though, they are investing in multiple different sequestration projects. They have a $1 billion fund for that purpose. At the moment, it's quite small, that portfolio. It is mostly reliant on sort of reforestation type projects at the moment, though they are increasing, sort of expanding in the carbon removal area with various pilots there. That's what these sort of the numbers are saying. When you look under the numbers, there's some interesting actions that I think, interesting to call out. Things like using low power server states. So they've seen a reduction of 25% in energy usage on unallocated servers by sort of putting servers in particular states on lower power. They're also looking to minimize their peak power consumption, because that drives, in part, the need to build new data centers, is that their data centers are always designed around the peak power that might be needed. They're doing some things to basically avoid underutilization and reuse power so as to minimize that peak. They also have a pilot, and this is the one in Washington, that is looking at matching 24/7, so every hour of every day across the year, that actually matches their demand for energy with renewable energy that comes from different sources. That's a big one, because there's lots of press around the cloud providers' Scope 2 emissions reporting, that for Microsoft, they still use a market-based approach, which means that they are actually reporting Scope 2 emissions that show the electricity that's being used in their data centers, and then they offset that by renewable energy credits that they're buying, even though those renewable energy credits might not be applicable to that local grid where they're operating. So it's good to see progress in terms of actually matching the demand from a data center with energy on that specific grid. If we turn to Google, Google's total emissions increased 13% from 22 to 23. That was primarily, if you look at the breakdown, due to increase in their purchased goods and services, their purchased electricity, and emissions, again, related to data center construction. They do have a 24/7 carbon-free energy target that they're aiming to have that in place by 2030, which is great. At the moment, they are reporting that they're at an average of 64% carbon-free energy. So there's been some progress, but there obviously needs to be a big jump between, in the 5.5 years between now and 2030. Google specifically state in their report that they expect Scope 3 emissions to continue rising in the near term, because they forecast that they will be increasing spend on technical infrastructure, especially related to AI. When you look through their report at some of the sort of specific actions that they're taking, there is lots on, their constant efforts to improve the efficiency of their data center. That's pretty much a given. Their report tends to focus on what their big initiatives are. They have a big aspiration, which you may have heard of, which is their 1 gigaton aspiration, which is all about helping others, be it individual cities, partners, collectively reduce 1 gigaton of their emissions annually by 2030. So that's fantastic in not just looking at their own footprint, but looking more widely. You may have heard me talk about things like the Environmental Insights API before, which is a great tool to give you insight on things like the air quality, the tree canopy coverage, your potential for solar panels on rooftops. And they're also enabling reductions through things like fuel efficient routing, helping drivers to take the most fuel efficient route. You may use that yourselves, and Nest thermostats, again, making homes heating more efficient. At the moment, Bupa are exploring whether we can bring in Google to help on our project that we're part of with the Sustainable Markets Initiative. The Health Systems Task Force, as part of the SMI, is looking to run a pilot in Camden in London that's focused on air pollution and lung health. So we're exploring whether we might use Google's Environmental Insights as part of that project, obviously showing residents when it's better to be outside and potentially how best to navigate a journey. So that's a sort of a whistle-stop view of what the latest data is showing for cloud providers, and a little taste of what they're doing. If we go back to that list of sort of the 5 actions that we can be taking now, the second one on that list was around leveraging low carbon intensity data centers. I feel like I use this slide every time I talk, so apologies if you've seen it before, but I think it's really helpful just to see this visually, to understand that data centers around the world have a different energy mix. The carbon intensity is basically measuring your mix of renewable and non-renewable energy. And in choosing to host our services in data centers with a low carbon intensity, we will be creating less emissions. The third one on that list was around monitoring our consumption. I say monitoring our consumption, but really it's about, we already monitor our consumption, but it's bringing in the emissions lens into that as well. So embedding sustainability into Cloud FinOps fundamentally. We are meeting with Aptio at the end of this month to have a demo of their sustainability offer, which they're releasing in Q4. We do have other measurements tools available to us. We have the Azure Emissions Dashboard, which tracks emissions at a subscription level. There's also the Azure Carbon Optimization Portal, which tracks at the resource level and not only allows you to sort of view the emissions, but also should be giving you potential optimizations as well. Both of those are based on spend currently, so they're not perfect. It all sort of links back to what you're spending your money on rather than where you're actually running what services. But at the moment, that is what the cloud providers, both Microsoft and Google, are providing. For Google, they have their Cloud Region Picker, which signals the energy mix of each hosting location to help you bring that into your choice of where you're hosting. They also, similar to Microsoft, have their Cloud Carbon Footprint and Active Assist, which shows you your footprint and provides some recommendations on where you could potentially reduce consumption. The fourth one on that list was around modernizing and using cloud native capabilities. And I'm sure this particular audience know infinitely better than me how migrating workloads to the cloud unchanged doesn't actually fully realize the potential of cloud. And neither does it fully realize the potential of sort of carbon reduction that cloud can also offer. So, transforming our business, we need to deliver on, business outcomes. And for a sustainable business, we know things like preventative care, digital health, access to healthcare, smart facilities. Those are important for us to enable. But cloud native also will allow us to further minimize our energy consumption and therefore emissions through cloud, through those things listed on the screen: resource efficiency, scalability, optimized workloads, built-in optimization. With geographic distribution, I've sort of mentioned that in terms of different data centers having different energy mixes. And actually, if we can distribute workloads around data centers to maximize the time that we're using the cleanest energy, and automate that would really have a good impact. We do need to be mindful that with data heavy applications, the transfer of data between regions would also have a footprint that needs to be considered, and that may be difficult to quantify. So it's worth bearing that in mind with data heavy applications. And the last item on that top 5 things we can do list was around reusing and deduplicating, which is something that, very simple. The more we can deduplicate, obviously, the more energy and emissions we can save. So I was then going to move to look at AI, and we should be applying those same 3 questions here in terms of, do we understand the impact of our usage of AI? How are we minimizing the associated environmental footprint and mitigating any risks to our net zero targets? AI really is, I suppose, at an inflection point, and there are many factors that will influence its ultimate impact. So this slide is highly simplified and really just a sort of a starting point of the conversation. Our ability to mitigate its footprint, the pace that it evolves, and innovation, the pace of sort of change in its efficiency, system level changes more widely in terms of the availability of carbon-free energy. All of these things are really important and will influence its ultimate impact. But for now, things that we can get into action on are things, I think, like ensuring we assess when we use AI. So obviously, AI is sort of front and center and very exciting, but we don't need to use it to solve every problem. And we should make sure that we're ensuring the solution fits the problem we're trying to solve. And if there is a simpler, more efficient solution, we should use that. I think we should start actually including environmental assessments into our sort of AI use cases. In particular, we might start with Gen AI, because that seems to be something of particular, interest, and that various parts of the business are looking to roll out and scale. So there is an environmental assessment available that's quick to run, inexpensive to run, and would help us make a decision. It would help us actually raise our understanding more generally about the environmental impact of these use cases, and also provide data that enables us to make the decision to say, does this sort of use of AI definitely merit that environmental impact, that potential use of emissions. And we're looking to build out some sort of a best practice guidelines or checklist that teams can use in advance of actually going through that assessment, that will help them sort of go through some really key steps, key things to look at when you're designing these use cases. Third on the list here is around improving knowledge and skills related to AI and sustainability generally. I'm keen that as the technology professions start to launch and roll out, that we do include some training around environmental impact, including things like green software engineering. I've already mentioned the low carbon intensity data centers. Obviously, that applies here as well. And we need to be, let's say, carbon aware with our AI and data use. Some of that falls into the green software engineering principles bucket in terms of things like right sizing data sets, choosing the sort of lowest accuracy for training of models that you can, and best practice around data in terms of APIs, caching efficiency, simplifying formats, etc. And I think it's also important not to forget the potential for AI to actually accelerate sustainability. Yes, we must take responsibility for its footprint, but actually let's also think about where it could advance our sustainability progress, both on the environmental and social side. I think there is lots of examples out there at the moment where that's being done. If we go back to sort of what the big cloud providers are doing in this space, for Microsoft, they've got, a long list of interesting projects of where they're using AI. They also have published an AI playbook I think these three here are really interesting in terms of the global carbon budget project. You might be aware that at the moment, to basically assess our carbon budget for the world, it's a very long and time-consuming process. I think that's why it's only done every few years. And there, Microsoft are working with a university to look at how they can actually try to move that to near real time, sorry. They're also looking at batteries, which obviously would make a huge difference if we can sort of increase the life of batteries and make them more applicable in more scenarios. So they're working with Battery ML, which is an open source tool, basically looking to share in order to streamline and unify approaches to sort of predicting and analysing battery performance. And obviously that insight will help us improve. In the area of carbon capture and storage, which obviously will play a big part in helping companies actually meet their net zero, because though you can reduce as far as you can, there will always be a portion of emissions that you can't avoid. So I've worked with Microsoft on a number of years on carbon capture and storage projects and pilots, and they're working on a particular project with Schlumberger and Northern Lights currently, which is looking at building an optimization workflow reliant on AI to basically find the optimal location of where to inject the CO2. So there's some really interesting uses of AI. There's a lot more out there beyond what Microsoft and Google are doing. Google are, pushing hard on this as well. They have put a whole section in their sustainability report on AI for sustainability. They released a report towards the end of last year with the Boston Consulting Group that gathered data and ultimately put forward a suggestion that they think AI could help mitigate 5 to 10% of global emissions by 2030, which is sort of equivalent to the total annual emissions of the European Union. So I think it's really important for us to, as a business, also think about the use cases for AI and whether they, the role they can play in our sustainability agenda as well. And then to close, I just wanted to share with you some of the proposed pilots that we're looking to run over the next sort of few months. The idea being to help us build on our existing tech sustainability KPI, which measures the amount of our tech spend with suppliers aligned to our net zero ambitions. We want to sort of expand our digital sustainability capability. And to do that, we're looking at running some pilots that help move from just looking at spend to actually looking at emissions and circularity and accessibility in line with the new Savannah strategy. So we're looking to run some pilots, including a responsible design assessment, which will take a strategic digital product and run an assessment in terms of its accessibility and environmental impact. That obviously gives you your sort of results, but it also gives you your insights on areas to improve. We're keen to start looking at using eco labels for our IT equipment to increase the amount of sort of equipment that we're buying that has reused or recycled component parts. We're quite good at the end of that journey in terms of we give a lot of our equipment to various charities for reuse, but we need to start thinking a bit of the front end of that as well. as mentioned, we're going to look to pilot the Gen AI use case environmental assessment and hopefully start to build out a pilot of how we can get sustainability embedded into Cloud FinOps. And then I think, importantly, we also need to keep pushing to embed sustainability across our teams, across our organization. It's not someone else's job, it's all of our jobs to think about how we can make what we do and what we're involved in more sustainable. The automate piece is really interesting, and I think it will we'll see a lot in that space over the next few years. But it'd be interesting for us to think about doing some further tests around automating task scheduling. We did have a hackathon team stand up a prototype on that a few years ago, or potentially load shifting. I think it would be good for us to, again, have a pilot to test out some of those things, and then we can see the results of all of those sort of experiments, share those back with across technology, across the different market units, and hopefully scale from there. And the aim ultimately is for us to help Bupa make progress against its sustainability targets, and help make healthcare itself a sustainable industry. And with that, I was going to open up for questions. I don't know if Sharif or Pauline, you wanted to come back in there?
Yeah, great talk, Steph. I think we've got a couple questions in the Q&A box. Whilst we go through those, I'm just going to launch a quick poll with some questions. It'd be really appreciative if you guys could do that. It helps us to plan Cloud Talks in the future as well. But yes, got some questions in the Q&A box here. I think from Max, we have, what are the differences between scope 1, 2, and 3 emissions?
So the high level answer to that is scope 1 emissions are emissions created from us actually, let's say, burning or using fuel ourselves, our people on our sites. So that's a very small percentage, tiny, of our footprint. Scope 2 emissions are what are created from the electricity that we purchase. So the electricity that we purchase to power our offices, our hospitals, our clinics, etc. And scope 3 emissions is the what we call indirect emissions category. So emissions that are created indirectly through our business, and that covers areas such as procured goods and services, the things that we buy. Actually, well, in creating that good and services, there would have been some associated emissions. That also covers investments that we make. It also covers travel from a customer and employee perspective. And importantly, it covers our claims as a whole. So any emissions to do with delivering on a claim. So the facilities, the equipment, the staff that would, deliver a treatment, for example, that also comes into our scope 3 emissions. And for Bupa, scope 3 is 98% of our footprint.
Thank you. Hope that answers your question, Max. Next up, we have Stefan. Which takes priority, meeting expected business response times or using a data center which has a low carbon footprint?
I mean, I'd have to say there's probably not, as much as I'd like to say, using a data center with a low carbon footprint. I don't think that's realistic. I think we have to take it on a case-by-case basis, and understanding what the business response times that are required and why, and the footprint of that data center, I think we should normalize bringing that into a discussion, make that a discussion point, and find a way to, on a case-by-case basis, find the right balance of both of those. I don't think we're at the point yet where we can say, you must pick a low carbon data center. Happy to be disagreed with on that.
Okay, we've got a question from Hayden. Can we all get a copy of this presentation to share amongst our peers/teams? Can that be made available, Steph?
Definitely. I'll let you do that, Sharif. Is that the easiest way?
Yeah, so I'll probably share that in either the chat or in an email follow-up at some point. And also you can come off mute. I think I've enabled the mics. So if you have any questions and you're comfortable saying it verbally, you can raise your hand and come off mute if you'd like to as well. Okay, Pauline.
Hi, thanks for that, Stephanie. A slightly tangential question to Bupa's activity, but obviously you're immersed in all this data. I'm just wondering, as individuals, and not specifically as people working for Bupa, but just as individuals, to what degree are all the micro activities that we're doing ourselves, storing 10 copies of the same photos, browsing the internet, to what degree are we at the point where actually we need to start looking at our own sort of digital activities, or is it all still so small in the scheme of things that we don't need to worry about that quite yet, and we just focus on sort of what we do as Bupa? It's difficult. I don't know if we're at that stage yet, or if this is the recycling plastic bags kind of activity that we should be doing with our phones.
So for me personally, I believe that we absolutely need the individual sort of micro level change, the corporate level change, and the government level change. And we need all three now, fundamentally. And they're interlinked, right? Because the more organic individual change, behavior change, and pressure there is, the more the corporates and the governments are going to pay attention, and the more we might see policy change or process change driven from those small individual changes, kind of building momentum to then have an impact, a larger impact through the kind of influence over those bigger corporate or government areas. Tech specifically, there is data out there. I don't want to say the numbers wrong, that sort of tells you the footprint of the emails that we're sending, for example. I think it's that if we send 20 emails a day, I'll put it in the chat afterwards. There is data out there that tells you what the impact of your sort of digital life is. I know that streaming in particular is an area of focus, that has a particularly high impact. I personally think that sort of, those good habits do add up. I don't think we need to purely, really focus on them. I think we should be focusing on which activities can have a significant impact as our priority. So some of those things that I listed out on the slide. But if we all sort of make our behaviours more sustainable as well, I personally believe that will add up and it will start to influence other things.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm just dropping some relevant links in the chat. The feedback form, the locations for the recordings and where they'll be posted, as well as a PDF for getting access to Confluence if you don't already have it. But any other questions? So do you think you can talk a bit, Stephanie, about if you think Bupa will hit our net zero targets?
I mean, it's a challenge, right? We've got the target of 63% by 2034 reduction in scope 3 emissions, and our scope 3 emissions are still going up. I realise that's 10 years away, but I'm sure we all know how quickly the years fly by. So quite frankly, it feels like a very ambitious target, though one that's absolutely required. What will help us to achieve that is the group sustainability team are now starting work on a transition plan, which will sort of underpin our sustainability strategy, where the strategy sets out our big goals and gives the business kind of direction to align with. The transition plan will go into more detail around these are the specific actions we need to take. These are the savings we think we're going to get from them. And importantly, these are the accountable teams, people for delivering on them. So it will, I think, by increasing that accountability and bottoming out, the critical actions over the next few years, hopefully that will give us a chance of actually meeting them, yes.
Perfect, thank you. So I think unless we have any other questions from anyone here, I think we might be good to wrap it up for the morning. Give people some time back in their calendars, I think. So yeah, thank you very much, Stephanie. Great presentation, and thank you to everyone for attending. Thank you for some great questions as well. I will get the slides from Stephanie, and I'll post them in the same location as the recordings as well. So you'll be able to find them there, and I'll post them in chat as well. I think you can reach out to Stephanie if you have any follow-up questions or anything else you want to explore further around this area. But otherwise, I think we're good to go. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thanks, Stephanie.
Thanks, Stephanie. Thanks, Sharif.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.